Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
How are you, sir?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Oh, very good. So I'm fine. You are Kaushal?
Yes, sir.
Oh. So when did you join the college?
So January 2018.
January 2018. So how many people are there in physics?
Sir, currently only 2 people are there.
Only two. You and Professor Misra.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Okay. ये बहुत अच्छा लगा इतने दिनों के बाद मिलके। बहुत अच्छा लगा सर इतने दिनों के बाद मिलके।
हाँ हाँ, मैं सोच रहा था कि कभी मैं भागलपुर आऊं, लेकिन मौका नहीं मिला आने का। जरूर आएंगे, थोड़ा लॉकडाउन खत्म हो जाए, थोड़ा सिचुएशन अच्छा हो तो जरूर आएंगे। तो स्टूडेंट्स अटेंड करेंगे लेक्चर?
हाँ, स्टूडेंट्स भी हैं, होंगे, स्टूडेंट्स भी होंगे, टीचर भी होंगे, दोनों होंगे।
तो ये प्रिंसिपल साहब कब ज्वाइन किए?
प्रिंसिपल साहब ने ज्वाइन किया 31 अगस्त को।
अच्छा, 31 अगस्त को।
जी हाँ, 31 अगस्त को उन्होंने ज्वाइन किया। और ठीक है, सब डायनामिज्म है, इतना बहुत बढ़िया ही है। हर दिन वेबिनार हो रहा है, बहुत अच्छा ये है, लग रहा है एनवायरनमेंट चेंज कर रहा है कॉलेज का। जी हाँ
होना चाहिए, बिल्कुल होना चाहिए। तो चूंकि अभी पॉसिबल नहीं है, नहीं तो हम टीम भेज देते फिर कि कहीं जाके 2 दिन जाके लेक्चर देख आप।
तो अब हम लोग ये शशांक सर है वहाँ। शशांक जी ज्वाइन किया आपने? Shashank ji has got the responsibility of introducing you to the participants, sir. So we will be actually.
No introduction required.
No, sir. It's you yourself are an introduction. So, but the people should know. They should have little idea about it. Who I'm talking to, who actually is giving the deliberations and all these things. So, ये बहुत अच्छा लगेगा उनको सुन के भी. Yes. Can we begin? What is the time, Kaushal?
Sir, it's 2:29 right now.
2:29. हाँ? नहीं हो रहा. Okay. So हाँ, यहीं से बोल दीजिएगा. पहले हम थोड़ा बोल देते हैं, उसके बाद हम आपकी तरफ.
मुझे आप थोड़ा परमिशन दीजिए तो मैं स्लाइड शेयर कर दूं, पहले देख लूं कि शेयर ठीक से।
यस सर, आप शेयर कर लीजिए।
श्योर सर.
मैं वीडियो थोड़ा ऑफ करूंगा।
राइट, यस श्योर.
स्क्रीन शेयर करने का परमिशन मुझे दे दिए?
यस सर.
ओके, वेरी गुड।
Oulu Southern Institute. University of Oulu, Finland. मैं सब अपना ऐसे कर दिए. वो अपना जो उन्होंने भेजा था, उन्होंने भेजा था. H index 30 and I-10 index 46.
ये हमारा स्क्रीन दिख रहा है वहाँ पे?
ये हाँ सर, दिख रहा.
चेंजेस भी हो रहा है ना?
यस सर, चेंजेस हो रहा है. यस.
Oh, very good.
Yes, sir.
मेरा तो आपको पता भी नहीं चलेगा बज ही रहा है। मेरा तो पता भी नहीं चलेगा आपको कि बज रहा है। अरे बाप रे।
Other participants, you can mute for the time being. You'll be given the permission to ask the questions in the question answer session, but right now you can keep yourself muted. Yeah, it's showing. Yes. Link has been actually link is written here. That is this ID and the password. Yes. So, should we begin? How many participants are there, Kaushal?
19 participants are there. 20.
20 right now we have. Some more are expected. They should come.
Yes, sir. They may join a bit late, I think, after 5-10 minutes.
So, should we begin?
Yes, sir.
With your kind permission, sir.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I'm ready.
Yeah. Yeah. You will introduce. No? So introduction can a little bit. I can just probably out there. Yes. Okay. So, Honorable Principal, distinguished teachers, and dear students, and all the participants. A very good afternoon to all of you. And we have gathered here today for the webinar on photonics for society. Photonics is a branch of physics which has been explored extensively in the recent past and has been an ongoing process in the same manner. Those little packet of photons from which the name emerges out is very crucial for breakthroughs in industrial material precision, processing, improved communication skills, medical breakthroughs, industrial material processing, and other numerous applications. Even the barcoding of goods, which helps us speed through the grocery stores using laser barcode scanners, is based on photonics. So you can understand how important photonics has become nowadays. And for the purpose, we have the deliberation today from Dr. Naveen Kumar Nishal, as Associate Professor, IIT Patna. For introduction, I'm inviting Professor Shashank Shekhar. Please, sir.
Good afternoon, Professor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good
Yes.
afternoon.
So, good afternoon. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. Nice to see you
Oh,
over online.
So am I. I'm delighted to see you. I mean, after a long time that
Yes,
we,
yes.
of course, we are meeting on virtual mode.
Yes.
And then things have not changed. There is no change in the shape. You are the same. Honorable Principal, Dr. Nirmal Kumar, Dr. Naveen Nishal, my faculty members, of course, esteemed faculty members, and dear students. It is with great delight I have to introduce Dr. Naveen Nishal, who is the faculty in the Department of Physics at IIT Patna since 2008. Dr. Nishal did his PhD in 2005 from IIT Delhi Previously, he served as Scientist C at IRD Dehradun from July 2004 to June 2007. Later on, he took up teaching at IIT Guwahati for 2007 to November 2008. Dr. Nishal has been a visiting researcher at Oulu Southern Institute, University of Oulu, Finland. He is a senior member of OSA and SPIE and a life member of Fellow of Optical Society of India, Indian Science Congress Association, Kolkata, and Laser and Spectroscopic Society of India. Dr. Nishal has authored a book, Optical Crypto System, published by Institute of Physics, published Bristol, UK. He has co-authored 65 peer-reviewed international journal papers and 160 papers in various conferences and seminars. Please mute your mic, participants. I mean, it obstructs the proceeding. As per Google Scholar, Dr. Naveen Nishal has 2,400 citations to his credit, with H index 30 and I-10 index 46. Currently, he is an associate editor of the journal Optical Engineering, SPIE, USA, and Asian Journal of Physics, India. So when you could look at the vast compendium of scholarly contributions for Dr. Naveen Nishal, it gives me a reason to introduce you to all with a scholar of such repute. And today, this afternoon, when he would be deliberating on photonics for society, I'm sure more than the society, my students and faculty members would be immensely benefited. And later on, from his deliberation, my students and faculty members would contribute to the growth of society after listening to Dr. Naveen Nishal. So let me get back immediately to the business of photonics for society. Over to Dr. Naveen Kumar Nishal. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, sir, for the kind introduction. I must thank to Dr. Nirmal Kumar, principal of the college, and all faculty colleagues over there. This lecture, which I am going to deliver now, I think it has been planned for a long time. Professor Shashank has called me
Yes.
2-3 times in the
Yes.
past, but it did not happen. Somehow today it is going to happen through the virtual mode. But in past I have visited the college. I stayed there one or two nights. It was a very good stay over there. Maybe in future again, I would love to come and visit and interact with the students. So for the better transmission, I would switch off the camera. So what I am going to discuss today is the very fundamental thing, what optics and photonics has contributed to the society as a whole, and what is being contributed today. So the contents of my presentation is photonics, optics and photonics over 100 years, and the 7 major developments what optics and photonics has contributed to the human being. Then I like to talk about optical sources, and one very important thing and very relevant in today's perspective, which is about coronavirus, COVID-19. Here also optics and photonics plays a very significant role. So that I would like to discuss. It is mostly for the students. And then if time permits, I would like to talk about vision optics, because whenever we talk about optics, it begins with the human being, our eyes are the very good lens. So how this vision things work, that I'll discuss. And then at the end, if time permits, I'll talk about the optical cryptography. So this is all the outline. Before I start my talk, I would like to request all the participants kindly mute your mic so that there is no interference and we can interact with each other. So in 100 years, optics and photonics has contributed to the society. So in that direction, there are 5 major developments that has transformed the 20th century. It is a one-time convergence which is unlikely to be repeated on same scale ever again. What are these? These are municipal sanitation, chemistry and pharmaceuticals, internal combustion, electricity, and electronic communications. So these are the 5 developments which transformed the 20th century. Within this, in the last 100 years, what all optics and photonics has contributed for the society. So there are 7 major developments which the optics and photonics has contributed that expanded the market and transformed our world to a smaller, more connected society. These 7 items are, or 7 developments are: electric lighting. If you remember this electric lighting, we used to have incandescent bulb. Now we are using LEDs. A very efficient lighting system. Not only efficient, it is economical as well. Displays are very important and it has affected everybody's life. Earlier, we used to have this cathode ray tube. Then we had flat panel displays, what we call as the liquid crystal displays, the screen of the laptop, screen of your smartphone. Then we have today organic LEDs, plasma LEDs. They are the more advanced versions which have been getting through. Third dimension is fiber optic communications. The first transatlantic telegram was done in 1958. And today, the very good example what we are seeing today, I am able to discuss and interact with the students at Bhagalpur. Not only in Bhagalpur, I can interact with anywhere anywhere in the world. And the credit goes to the fiber optic communications. Of course, the basic principle of optics is used in the fiber optic communication, that is called total internal reflection. That's the fundamental principle on which the whole fiber optics communication is based. Then next comes cameras and imaging. We all remember that we used to have this analog cameras where we have to have these films. You take a picture and you cannot get the film developed until you exhaust all the snaps, or you waste those snaps. You go to the photographer, they will do the processing and give you the positives. Now everyone is having a smartphone. Every smartphone is having camera facilities. So cameras and imaging has transformed, starting from photochemical film. Today, the CCDs, charge coupled device, and the CMOS, charged metal oxide semiconductors. Then microlithography optics, which is used in precision optics, in patterning and inspection. Then deep science, a study about the deep science, laser, Big Bang, gravity waves, and vision correction. OCT means the optical coherence tomography. It is very much used in the vision correction. So these are the 7 major developments what optics and photonics has contributed in last 100 years. What is next? What are the futuristic research areas then? The futuristic research areas have to be within, because our resources are going to be limited. Natural resources will be limited. So we have to keep in mind that how to maximally utilize the limited natural resources. And the second important thing is the life sciences. We have to have, like we are suffering with the COVID situation, we don't have a vaccine for that. So life sciences will always be crucial and will always attract research, and people have to contribute in that direction. Third important is the security. Whether you use a mobile phone and you have to secure your voice when you are talking to two people are talking to each other, or you are securing your information. Today, this India-China is under tension. Security plays a very significant role there. Fourth important aspect is the intelligent automation. And this intelligent automation, it covers big data, artificial intelligence, everything. So these are the futuristic research areas. People have to think and work in these research areas. And in all the cases, optics and photonics has a significant role to play. So coming back to actual optical things, in optics, how do you define a light? A light is an electromagnetic wave, and what light we see is within the range visible wavelength. This visible wavelength is very short wavelength, from 400 nanometer to 700 nanometer. Before 400 nanometer wavelengths, those light waves, we call them as ultraviolet lights, and after 700 we call them as infrared lights. These infrared lights and ultraviolet light are not visible to us, we cannot see. So we have to have different kinds of detectors and different mechanisms. But these wavelengths are very important. What I'm going to talk about this coronavirus, there the ultraviolet has a very significant role to play. And infrared waves, very good example again in the coronavirus case, the temperature, the thermal camera, temperature what we take from that a certain distance, infrared camera, they are based on this wavelength. And then we have the X-rays, gamma rays, and microwaves. All these wavelengths are very useful, very important, but in different domains and different application areas. So we'll start with our discussion with the optical sources. In optical sources, we had this incandescent sources, bulb, lamp, globe. Then we had the fluorescent sources, which converts ultraviolet light to visible light. The emission happens due to absorption. Discharge lamps, very good example, electric discharge through ionized gas or plasma. High intensity discharge lamp, generation of the arc between two electrodes. Then this light emitting diode, which is today's application area. Two lead semiconductor diode, and we have improved versions like organic LED, quantum dot LED, and so on. So this is the incandescent bulb. Now nobody is using this incandescent bulb. The reason is, if you use one bulb for 100 watt power, you can use 10 LED light and you can lit 10 rooms instead of one room with 100 watt incandescent bulb. The important thing about this bulb and the LEDs is one of the examples of the high intensity discharge lamp. So this light emitting diode is very crucial and very important. What happens that when you use this forward bias voltage, apply across the junction. Across the junction means the PN junction, P-type and N-type semiconductor. It produces a current flow in the form of electrons and holes flowing into junction. If the current is low, then incoherent light is emitted. This is a very important point here. If the current what you are applying is low, then incoherent light is emitted. This is what we call as the LED light. If this current is high, then that will provide you coherent light source, and that gives you diode laser. So this is what the diode laser and this diode light has the difference. LEDs are typically a small, and the most important thing about these LEDs is that this incandescent, if you compare the incandescent bulbs, which are much less efficient, most other types of the electric lighting, it used to convert less than 5% of energy they use into visible light. This is what the incandescent bulb will do. It will convert only 5% of the energy into useful light. With the standard light bulbs, it averages about 2.2%, very small, very less. So where the rest of the energy is going? Rest of the energy is getting converted into heat. And for this is the reason, if you visit some of the rural areas, you will find the local shops selling samosa, and they will put a 100-watt bulb within a glass cavity and put that samosa inside. So this light bulb will generate enough heat to warm up those samosas. So this is the theory they are using, because in this case, most of the energy is getting converted into heat, which is basically it is getting wasted. If you compare with the other light sources, like typical incandescent bulb, lumens per watt is 16 lumen per watt. Compact fluorescent bulb, it has 60 lumen per watt. White LED lamps, it has 150 lumen per watt. So here efficiency is much, this lumens per watt is much better, much better. That is why nowadays all these newer cars and motor vehicles, what you get, they all use LEDs. They don't use those earlier versions. If you compare the lifetime, incandescent bulbs had the lifetime of 1,000 hours. Compact fluorescent bulb, that is also now obsolete, the lifetime was 10,000 hours. But the LEDs, it is 30,000 to 100,000 hours. So now you can see the LEDs lifetime is much better, efficiency is much better, and it is very cost effective as compared to the previous version. And this is the reason that our Honorable Prime Minister always makes a statement that we have covered the whole region, the whole country with this lighting. And if you compare this, the feature, I'll show you in the next slide, that seeing development in a new light. If more light is there, that is a kind of parameter to see the growth and development in that area. So you can see the newspaper clipping of June 27, 2018 from the Times of India. You can see in the insert there are two pictures, one from 2012 and another from 2016. Now, if you look at these pictures, 2012 and 2016, you can see that 2016 it is more brighter. It means more light is there. So that's a kind of parameter, so that it is growing, it is more developing. So light is also seen in the new light, seeing development in the new light. So these light sources, these are the incoherent light sources. Then we have this coherent light source. Now, important thing is why this LED light suddenly became very important. Because this LED light, if you do a very simple experiment, take a prism, allow a normal white LED light to pass through the prism, it will give you only three colors: red, green, and blue. These are the primary colors. So this white light and LED light, it is made up of only 3 colors. It doesn't have all other colors. While on the sunlight, what you see, if you use a prism again, it will give you the very good spectrum, all 7 colors. So it will give you all 7 colors. So what happened in this lighting system, that red LED was available to all of us. Green LED was also available to us. But there was non-availability of the blue LED light source. So which caused this problem. And until unless this blue LED lights were discovered, white LED light were not available. The day the blue LED light were made available, that discovery was done. The Japanese scientist who discovered that phenomenon, he got the Nobel Prize because of that research. And then we are having this white LED light. And this white LED light, you have seen the features, it has transformed our life. So if you compare the light from the various sources like sun, light power is 10 raised to power 26 watt, but the power density is very low. It is 5 into 10 raised to power 2 watt per centimeter square. 100 watt filament lamp, 3 watt light power, power density is 10 raised to power minus 2. If you take a helium neon laser, say of 1 milliwatt, the power density is very high, 4 into 10 raised to power 4 watt per centimeter square. Similarly, carbon dioxide laser or pulse laser, the power density is 10 raised to power 14 watt per centimeter square. So the density is very high. So it can damage anything. That is why whenever we are dealing with the lasers, doing any experiment with lasers, we have to be very, very careful while dealing with that. And these lasers are used for destroying a building, destroying anything, because the density is very high, it will burn everything. So this, why I mentioned these lasers, because these lasers were discovered in 1960. It is only 60 years, 60th year of this lasers invention. And this slide shows that laser cells have grown at the rate of 15%, like 1,000 fold in last 50 years. From 1960 to 2015, this data is up to 2015. The 2020 data is yet to come. And the whole photonics business, which major part of is lasers, is US 400 billion per year. This is the contribution from the photonics industry, of photonics business. Kausalji, somebody is writing something on the screen. Please do not allow him to, or ask him to remove. And please ask others to mute their mics.
I'm muting the mics of. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are audible. I am muting the mics of the participants as soon as they are entering.
Okay. No, somebody is writing something.
Disable
Who is
the
right?
disable the annotation. Disable the annotation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I will just.
So next thing what I wanted to discuss in this series of the light sources, important light source in today's perspective is the ultraviolet radiation, which we get very easily from the sunlight. We have the infrared, we have the visible light, and we have the ultraviolet light rays. These ultraviolet wavelengths, what you can see on the screen, it has 3 bands. Ultraviolet A, ultraviolet B, ultraviolet C, UVA, UVB, and UVC. The wavelength range is mentioned. UVA has the wavelength 315 to 400 nanometer. Ultraviolet B has the wavelength 280 to 315 nanometer. And UVC has the wavelength as
Sir, your presentation is not shown.
Yeah, it suddenly went. It is fine.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, it is okay.
Okay. So this ultraviolet wavelengths, it has three regions: UVA, UVB, and UVC. So this UV radiation, which covers the wavelength from 100 nanometer to 400 nanometer, which is a higher frequency and lower wavelength than visible light, which usually naturally comes from the sun, but it can also be created through artificial sources used in the industry, commerce, and recreation. So as sunlight passes through the atmosphere, all the UVC band approximately 90% of the ultraviolet B band radiation is absorbed by the ozone, water vapor, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. So ultraviolet A band is less affected by atmosphere. Therefore, UV radiation reaching Earth's surface is largely composed of UVA with a very small amount of UVB component. And this is the reason we say that our ozone layer should be intact so that it should stop these UVB and C. So the amount of ultraviolet radiation from the sun that hits the Earth's surface, it depends on several factors: sun's height in the sky, latitude, cloud cover, altitude, thickness of ozone layer, and ground reflection. So as you can see, it varies from place to place. Reductions in ozone layer due to human created pollution increase the amount of UVA and UVB. And this is the reason we say that our pollution levels should not increase, because this can impact human health, animals, marine organisms, and plant life.
ये बंद होता है सर, ये यहाँ देखिए लिखा हुआ है लीव, इस पे जैसे क्लिक करेंगे.
In humans, this increased ultraviolet exposure can cause skin cancers, cataracts, and immune system damage. And this UV index is high during morning 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And this is the reason it is said that please avoid sunlight during this period. But before 10 a.m., it is very good, and that is why it is said that you should expose yourself to the sunlight so that you receive maximum vitamin D. So what is important here, that this ultraviolet rays, which can damage our skin, it can damage the microorganisms. And this is the reason it is used in the water treatment. The Kentaro water purifier, this is the concept which is used. It kills the microorganisms. So basically, the ultraviolet rays actually strike the cell. It penetrates outer cell membrane, passes through cell body, and disrupts its DNA that prevents the reproduction. This is the basic concept. So whenever this ultraviolet rays is exposed to the microorganisms, it doesn't kill that microorganism, but it disrupts its DNA so that reproduction is not allowed. So whatever we are drinking water, excuse me, somebody is speaking. Any question?
But yes, participants are allowed to ask question after the session is over. Please don't interrupt in between.
So this ultraviolet treatment does not alter the water chemically. No chemical is applied. Nothing is added except energy. What the energy you are giving in the form of light. Sterilized microorganisms are not removed. So whatever the disrupted DNA is there, it is not removed from the water. It will be there, but when we are consuming that water, it is not going to harm us, because they have lost all the properties and they cannot be reproduced in our body. So this degree of inactivation, where it will be inactivated, it depends what is the dose of the ultraviolet light you are applying to the water. So for small industry, for our household applications, different doses has been decided. This dose is decided in terms of the UV light intensity and exposure time, microwatt per second, watt second per centimeter square. So ultraviolet light does not effectively disinfect some of the organisms like molds, protozoa, cysts of Giardia. They are not disturbed. For killing them or for disrupting their DNA, we have to enhance the dose of the UV light. Then we can kill them also. So it depends in which area the water, what is the type of the water, what are their contents. Accordingly, these systems are designed. So these systems will not work everywhere equally, because the UV dose has to be defined, and UV dose will define the cost of the system also. So what about the SARS-CoV-2? So since this ultraviolet light is being used for killing those microorganisms to provide you the safe water, we can use that ultraviolet rays to kill the coronavirus also, but in a different way. What is that? How the optics and photonics technology is being used in that case. This SARS-CoV, what is the full name of this virus? It is Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2, which was declared by the WHO on 11th February 2020. These viruses are named by the ICTV, which is the International Committee on Taxonomy of Viruses. They are defined based on their genetic structure to facilitate development of diagnostic tests, vaccines, and medicines. High quantum efficiency, multispectral cameras, visible light laser diodes, LEDs, infrared bolometer arrays, narrowband optical filters, wideband multispectral spectrometers. These are the things which are being utilized and being used in case of to fight with these viruses. They are already in use. IR thermometer, the wavelength is 8 to 14 micron. It is already been used everywhere. Whenever you have visited any place, you must have seen these things. So what are the tests? There are molecular diagnosis. Symptoms are the sore throat, dry cough, muscle ache, fatigue. So RT-PCR test is there, specimen collection, then sample processing. So probes are tagged with the molecules of fluorescent dye. This is what the RT-PCR instrument looks like. You can put many samples together and they use enzymes. Sample is thermally cycled through 40 minutes between this temperature range, 37 degree to 95 degree. So here, this RT-PCR says the real time. So the real time term comes because of the optical technology. Here we use these enzymes to create duplicate copies, and then they are enhanced, and finally we compute them by measuring the intensity built up during thermal cycling. The virus is detected, and amount of virus present can be estimated, and this amount of virus present different cases. It's not same with everybody, and this is what helps in the treatment of the viruses. I'll skip these more detailed things. If somebody is interested, I can discuss about that. I'll come back to the actual thing, where this ultraviolet rays are being used. This is another antigen test, what is called ELISA. It is enzyme-linked immunoobservant assay. So I'll skip them because these are about the antibodies. So what is UV for COVID-19? So the basic purpose where, and the basic theme where this ultraviolet rays can be used is to use disinfect public areas such as public transport, aeroplanes, sports arenas, basically the sterilization of the surfaces. So to kill the COVID-19 virus, you have to apply very high levels of the ultraviolet light. And because high levels of light has to be used, so cost of those systems goes up. Everybody wishes for a handheld UV light device, which should have very high performance. What is the solution for that? Because you have to have materials in that wavelength region. This is what the limitation we have. So to develop high performance portable diodes that can have a current applied to them for light transmission, they needed to be transparent to the ultraviolet light. So what is the material? Material is the bigger challenge and limitation to this case. Recently, a group of Chinese scientists have come up with the solution of the strontium niobate, which can be used in this UV rays, UV treatment for the coronavirus. So mostly the face mask and the face shield. So what the UV ray will do, this is the disinfectant box, what you can see here. You can put all the face masks, PPE kit, what all you want to disinfect, put it there. They have the ultraviolet lights, cover it up, switch on the UV light, leave it for some time accordingly as the dose is decided. And after that time, you take it out. The things are disinfectant. Whether you use a face mask, PPE kit, everything is disinfected. So there are some of the components which are already available in the market. It is UV disinfection lamps you can use in the offices, UV sterilization box. So this UVC light is mostly used in this case because that is safe to the human being as compared to the other things. This is a very good example of the UV germicidal in the Moscow metro transit system. They are being used. So whenever there is no passenger in the train, they will switch on these UV lights and it will disinfect the whole train. You don't have to do any chemical spray here. Simply switching on the UV light will disinfect the things. And this can be used not only in the metros, it can be used in the buses, public places. Everywhere you can use this one. So how can be this utilized in a much better approach? And this what the approaches which have been given here. You have the infected subject, virus transmission. So like you can see, there are different figures shown here. And in these figures, UV lights are kept at different locations where there is not direct human touching. There is no exposure to the human being directly, but it will disinfect that area. This is how you can use in the offices. This is how you can use in the restaurants, in buses, and several other locations. This is what the UV light can help fight with the coronavirus. So these are the most important wavelength is 222 nanometer wavelength, which is very useful and which kills the coronavirus. So there are newer research areas which are coming on the UV disinfected systems. They are trying with the various things. This is an e-book. You can note down this website. You can download. You cannot download. You can read this e-book online. It is from a Chinese scientist who wrote this book in March. It is freely available. Prevention and control of the COVID-19. You can note down the website if you wish, and you can read it online. You cannot download the book, but you can read it online. It tells about the various things, the precautions and important information on coronavirus. So next I'll move to the topic vision optics. In vision optics, as we all know, that our eyes are basically an optical lens. It serves as an optical lens. It's a convex lens. And as the theoretically, it should produce an inverted image, but we never see an inverted image through our eyes because it is the neurons and it is our brain which does the processing, and that is why we see all the image as it is. We don't see inverted image. So the slide shows the anatomy of the eye. You have the ciliary body and the muscle, iris, pupil, cornea, anterior chamber. This anterior chamber is filled with the aqueous humor. It's a material. Then you have the sclera, choroid and retina where the images are formed. Then macula, optic nerve, which carries the information from the lens to our brain. And this is the vitreous body what we have in our eye system. So general structure of the eye at front, this sclera merges into a transparent layer, what we call as the cornea. Thickness of is about 0.5 millimeter and radius of curvature is about 7.8 millimeter. So this spherical shape of the eyeball is maintained because of the internal pressure, and internal pressure is about 2 to 3 centimeter of mercury. Behind cornea, we have this anterior chamber, which I was just showing, which has an axial thickness of about 1.3 millimeter and is filled with a watery, slightly saline fluid of refractive index 1.33x. These are important parameters because this is what it tells you about the use of optics and why optics and vision optics is connected. So that refractive index of that aqueous humor is 1.336. Then you have the pupil. The size of the pupil varies from the iris from about 2 millimeter to 8 millimeter. This size varies depending upon the light available to you. If it is the bright light, then the pupil size will be smaller, that is the 2 millimeter, and maximum it can go to the 8 millimeter when there is dark. So this adaptation is automatically, you don't have to do any adaptation. It is natural. So this crystalline lens has a biconvex outer, front and back surfaces. The radii are about 10 millimeter and 6 millimeter. Axial thickness is this much. Then we have this lens is not homogeneous because it is inhomogeneous material. The refractive index is not uniform throughout. Refractive index varies from 1.37 in outer parts to about 1.42 in the middle. Inner surface of the rear part of the eyeball contains receiving screen called retina, where the image formation takes place. So the optical nerves which connects our retina to the brain, and this is how it helps to see any image or object.
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir. So can you disable the annotation of the participant? It's you who can do it actually.
Okay.
Sir, where you are viewing your screen, there you will get option view screen view options. There you can go and click on annotation, and then you can stop participants from annotating.
I can see annotate, but I don't know how to stop it.
There are 3 dots, marked 3 dots at the right corner.
Yes.
If you click on that, you will get those options.
Record meeting, disable participants annotation. Okay. So
Yes, sir.
I think
Yes,
it
sir.
is
That's
disabled
it.
now.
Yes.
Okay. So this is about the demonstration of the blind spot. These blind spot, normally we do not feel. Whenever we are seeing things from both the eyes, we do not see this blind spot. You can perceive this blind spot if you close one of your eyes and look at some certain object. Then again close another eye and look at the same object. Then you can perceive there is some area where you are not able to see. So this is basically a blind spot. It varies from the horizontal to the vertical case. We do not normally perceive because we see things from both the eyes. We will perceive this blind spot only if we close one of the eyes. Then you will be able to perceive this. So this is the symmetric of the eye. Why I want to show this symmetric, that there is a scientist, Gullstrand, who suggested a symmetric eye. The idea is that if somebody who is not able to see, can we create artificial eye? Because as you have seen that there are different materials, different refractive indices, different kinds of structures, can be create artificially. And for that creation, Gullstrand suggested a model. And in that model, he used these parameters like radius of curvature, distance, and various refractive indices. But still it is failed. There is no artificial eye which can replace our natural eye. And it so happens that for average person, there is an accommodation which varies from 14 diopters at the age of 10 years to about 4 diopters at the age of 40. So it goes down, and after that it falls almost to 0 at the age of 75. This adaptation, what I mentioned in the beginning, that the size which is 2 millimeter to 8 millimeter from the bright to dark situation. So this adaptation and accommodation, this changes, and this is the reason everyone needs a spectacle after the age of 40. It varies from person to person, but everyone would require a spectacle after the age of 40. Somebody in 45, somebody in 50, somebody is 47, and so on. Everyone is needed. Somebody will have one kind of problem, somebody will have another kind of problem. So after the age of 40, it is bound to happen with every human being. So I think I'll skip some of these things. So in human vision, another important thing what I wish to tell you, that this retina has 2 types of receptors. We call them as rods and cones. They are the light receptors, rods and cones. Rods and cones, they are responsible for day and night vision. Rods, the number of rods are 120 million rods and 7 million cones in our eyes. Cones are responsible for day vision and rods are responsible for night vision. We call them as scotopic vision and photopic vision. Cones are responsible for day vision and rods are responsible for night vision. Rods are of only one kind. So it is the monochromatic vision in dim light. This is the reason we do not see color in light, in dark. In dark, we have only one photoreceptor, which is rod. That is monochromatic. It doesn't have color sensation. So at night time, we will not be able to distinguish colored images, colored objects. But in daytime, we can. So in daytime, the cones have 3 types of cones. They are called they are based on the primary colors, red, blue, and green. Trichromatic vision, what we call. So this is what the photopic and scotopic vision is. So it is the wavelength sensitive. In what wavelength it is more sensitive, what you can see here for the scotopic vision and for the photopic vision. So this seeing things colored or monochrome, it happens in day and night. In day, we can see the colors because of these cones, which are of 3 types. And rods are single type, monochromatic. So rods means at night time or in dark light, you cannot see the colors. Now this kind of colors, what you can see in daytime, it again varies from person to person, and it causes a disease called color blindness. Many of you, particularly for the students, they may not have tested their eyes for the color blindness test. The day they will be getting any job, go for the medical checkup, that time they will be given a booklet and they will be asked, you tell whether you are able to read these digits, so that it will tell you whether you are colorblind or not. So color blindness is basically a color deficiency. It is impaired color vision. The three kinds of cones what we have, red, green and blue. If there is any impairment in those number of cones, it gives you this color blindness. So red, blue and green cones are sensitive to those colors and combinations of them. You need all three types to see colors properly. When your cones don't work properly or you don't have the right combination, your brain doesn't get the right message about which color you are seeing. And finally, what happens that you are not able to distinguish colors, and you are designated that you are colorblind. So how these colorblind tests are done? The pure physics, pure optics subject. The treatment will be done by the doctors, but how this test is done, it is purely optical test. I hope the students will find it interesting. So what happens that you generate a random pattern of gray levels, dots, and then you put them together. This is what is created. Then a digit pattern is added, which is defined by the yellow or blue variation only. Since most people with red, green color blindness can see yellow or blue. So what happens? They will be able to see the digit 5 in this test pattern. Next, another digit pattern which is defined by a red-green variation is added. So then you add this pattern composed of random brightness pattern and red-green pattern. Same digit, you have put it here. Now what happens? Finally, all the three are added. People with red-green deficiency will not be able to see red-green pattern and will see 5. People with normal vision will see both patterns, but since red-green is stronger than yellow-blue, normal person will see 6. This is how the test patterns are made, and this pattern is, several of these examples are put in a book. That booklet is said as the color blindness booklet, and that is shown by the medical people to every participant, to those who are undergoing medical checkup. So can you tell me what is this number is? You can test yourself whether you are colorblind or not.
It's 74, sir.
For the students.
74, sir.
Yes, sir. They are typing in message box 74. They are mentioning.
Okay, very good. So it means they are not colorblind.
Yes.
So those who are colorblind will say it is 21, not 74. So this color blindness is basically a decreased ability to see color or differences in color. It can make some educational activities difficult, such as buying fruit, picking clothing, reading traffic light, and that is why for driving license, if you are colorblind, you are not eligible for a driving license. Pilot, train driver, armed forces. Very peculiar information is here that the males are more likely to be colorblind than females. We don't know the reason. and there is no cure for color blindness. There are different types of color blindness: red green color blindness, blue yellow color blindness, or total color blindness. But it varies from person to person. So I think that is all from the this side. Can I talk some more time?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can take time.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I
Sure.
hope I am not boring students.
No, sir. It's very informative, very, very interesting.
So next thing what I wanted to talk about, it is mostly for the computer science engineers. I am sure there must be computer science students attending this talk. So they all use this CD, and if you hold this CD simply in the sunlight, this is the kind of colors what you see. What this color represent basically. And the CD you have nominal track separation, and that separation is 1.6 micron, basically corresponding to 625 tracks per millimeter. So the moment this sunlight falls on this, or any normal light falls on this CD, they get diffracted. The diffraction phenomena occurs here, and due to that diffraction, you see these kinds of color pattern because of the white light what you are using. So the students and mostly all of us use this compact CD or digital versatile disc. CD or DVD we all use. So what is the basic principle on which these CDs and DVDs are being read and written? How do you write data on a CD, or how do you retrieve data from a CD or DVD? If students, those who are unaware, they'll be surprised to know it is the basic phenomena of optics, what you know as the interference phenomena, which takes place here. So what happens, this data is stored digitally, a series of 1 and zeros read by the laser light reflected from the disk. Every device has a laser diode placed there for reading and writing CD, data to the CD or DVD. So you will have strong reflections from the CD surface that correspond to constructive interference. Their reflections are chosen to represent zeros. It means constructive interferences. Strong reflections are chosen to represent as zeros, and weak reflections correspond to destructive interference, and those reflections are chosen to represent as ones. So this is how it is digitized: 0 and 1, constructive and destructive interference. This is how the data from a CD is read. As the disk rotates, laser reflects off sequence of bumps and lower areas into a photodetector. This photodetector converts fluctuating reflected light intensity into an electrical string of zeros and ones. You have a pit depth, what you can see in this image. This pit depth is made equal to 1/4 of the wavelength of the light. It has to be of 1/4 of the wavelength of the light, and this 1/4 So which wavelength you are using, accordingly these the storage capacity of these devices vary. So for reading the CD, a laser beam hits around destructive interference and very low intensity when reflected beams combine at the detector. Bump edges are read as ones, flat bump tops and intervening flat planes are read as zeros. So ones and zeros have been done. These DVDs, which were developed by Panasonic, Philips, Sony and Toshiba in 1995. So DVDs wavelength lasers are used. So track separation, bit depth, which is basically lambda by 4, and minimum bit length are all small. Therefore, DVD can store about 30 times more information than a CD. A CD stores 650 MB or 700 MB of the data. A DVD can store 4.5 GB of the data. If you use another light, say it is DVD, then this storage capacity is further improved and it is 25 GB of the data can be used. There is a dual Blu-ray DVD which has the storage capacity of 50 GB of the data. So this is how these data storage is done in the CDs and the DVDs. So it is the bit depth which is very important here and which has to be of the wavelength of the 1/4 of the wavelength. So in the CDs, the wavelength used is 780 nanometer or 680 nanometer. So that is why the bit depth will be 1/4 of that. If you use Blu-ray light, 400 nanometer wavelength, then 1/4 becomes 100 nanometers. So storage capacity is more. And this is the reason how the data is read and written on a CD and how it is read and what causes the storage, various storage of the data in these devices. So the last thing what I wish to talk about is the information security. That is the my research area. I think I can speak 10 more minutes on this before I wind up. So
Yeah,
information security is basically protecting your information or data from unauthorized use and the counterfeiting. It is very important, as I said in the beginning, that security will remain a varied research area in future. It is very important area today. It was very important area in the past and it will remain valid important area in future also. So as a futuristic device, we are already using digital techniques of information encoding. So optical techniques are important because optics can beat processing a speed of everything, because in this case light varies with the speed of light, which is very high. So in optical techniques, there are some degrees of freedom like amplitude of the light, wavelength of the light, phase of the light, polarization state of the light, and orbital angular momentum of the light. So these features can be utilized in a storage of securing a data. So what is the basic concept of the optical encryption is that you start with a beautiful picture or any image, any data. You multiply it with a random phase mask, which is basically phase pattern, random phase pattern, physical pattern. Then you illuminate it with the coherent beam of light. So both the functions get multiplied and you have a lens here. This lens, we call it as the Fourier transforming lens. It will give you the Fourier transformation of the input function. The moment you reach to the Fourier plane, we place one more random phase mask. So these two phase masks, one in the input plane, another one in the Fourier plane, they are called as the keys. They are helping secure the data. And finally, what you get is this pattern, because obtaining 2 times Fourier transformation of any function gives you the image back. But this image, which was a beautiful picture here, it has been transformed into a noisy pattern. And this is what you can see as a noisy image. So in this crypto system, it is of 2 types, symmetric and asymmetric crypto system. And we use the quick response code, QR code. In the beginning, Dr. Misra was referring about the barcode scanners. Barcode scanners are basically one-dimensional picture. QR code is a 2-dimensional picture, 2-dimensional barcode, which was developed by, again, a Japanese group of scientists. And this QR code can store more data, more information as compared to the barcode. Barcode has very small, less storage capacity. On the other hand, QR code has better storage capacity. This is how it works. and the features, I think everyone will be familiar with this QR code. So it has different versions, and accordingly different amounts of data can be put into the QR code. So what we have done here in this one of the encryption system, that you have an input image, then you Arnold transform to that image. It means it will scramble the image, and then you make different blocks of that image, and each block of that information is encoded into a QR code. Then you combine all the matrices, do some further processing, and get two functions, P1 and P2. For the reconstruction, you have to apply the same thing. This is an example of the Arnold transformation. You can do various iterations and get the different types of pictures. One of the results I'll show, this is one of the results with the QR code. In this case, we had 64 QR codes generated. One of the QR codes, you can use your own smartphone QR code scanner and see this kind of data, and you can convert that image back. But you have to combine everything together. This is what is done in the actual optical experimental setup, where we have applied the exclusive OR gate XOR operation through optically. Here we are using two spatial light modulators. They are pixelated device. They are pixel to pixel matched. And this is how you can generate the encrypted image. I'll show you these results. This is the plain text or input image to be encoded as the QR code. Then this is the encryption key. This is the encrypted image. Decrypted QR code with incorrect keys. So nothing is, no information has been retrieved here. This is with the white LED. This is with the laser diode, laser light. So as you can see in case of laser light, it has lots of noise. While use a normal LED, it has reduced noise. So that is good for the actual experimental, actual practical system. The same thing was done with the for a colored image, and I can show you the image of results from the color image, the simulation results. Plain text, red, one of the red components, because this color image has to be separated into red, green, blue color components, and then they have to be processed independently. This is what you have, this simulation result. It was done in experiment also. The results what you can see here. Some security analysis has been done on that basis. So at the end, I wish to tell you about some of the Nobel Prizes in optics and photonics, because I started the topic of my talk was the photonics in society. So there are some of the each discovery has societal benefit, like lasers. You have seen the applications. Holography, you are seeing the application, because every costly item has a hologram onto it. You buy any book, costly book, there is a hologram onto that. And recent development, this is what the blue LED I was talking about. The 2014 Nobel Prize of Physics went to these people who discovered the blue light. Then we have the optical tweezers, which went to 2018 Physics Nobel Prize. So they are all optics and photonics related Nobel Prizes to this to these scientists. And at the end, I wish to let you know about my recent book, which I have written. It has been published from the Institute of Physics, United Kingdom. The book is available now. You can buy from the market, and if somebody is interested, I can share a soft copy, ebook on a personal basis. If you are interested, you can read these things. At least 2 chapters are available freely. You can download them. So thanks very much for your kind attention. I think I have taken longer time as I was asked to talk about. So thank you so much for your kind attention. If you have quick questions, I'll be able to answer. If I'm not able to answer today, you can write me the email, and you can always interact with me. Thank you so much.
You can post the question in the chat box. If anybody is having any questions, please post it in the chat box. I think, sir, there is no questions from the participants. There are no questions from the participants.
So then I have to thank them for asking no question.
No, Shed, we are here to thank you for, in fact, very informative, extremely engrossing lecture, deliberation. And yes, in fact, the participants don't have any queries, so I will request Professor Kaushal Jha to give you a vote of thanks.
First of all, thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation and giving lecture on such a topic which each and every student can attend, and even faculty from different domains were able to get some sort of information from this about lighting, LEDs, and what the importance of LEDs, the differences among the what. Just a second, sir. Just a second, sir. Okay. And you gave a clear description that why we are using LEDs and not incandescent lamps or fluorescent bulbs right now. Then you gave the practical application of diffraction on the CDs and suggesting the practical application of interference on how we are reading and writing data from a CD. So I think all the participants and the number of participants initially were too high. Right now they are leaving. So we have a good number of participants, around 80, 86 participants were there initially. Then after that, some participants left. Thank you for giving such an enlightening lecture. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Well, we are looking forward to see you in person here, sir, in Bhagalpur.
Sure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay, sir. Then I will end the session now.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.